We're gonna take this perfectly running Ford 5000, rip the motor out of it. We're gonna stuff this bad boy in there. This is a Ford Brazilian 7.8 out of a L8000. I've gone ahead and put the fuel tank, it's just resting there. I put the fuel tank kind of on the tractor about where it should go. And a couple things we're running into now. Clearancing issues. And obviously some issues with the heat exchanger for the oil cooler. So as you can see, we're like within half an inch here. We're very close there. And got some clearancing issues here as well. I dented in the pan, the bottom of the pan, pretty good. And I just can't get this rib any flatter. That'd be a leaking point right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut the bottom of this out right here, probably up into here. And I'm gonna put a piece of flat plate in there, probably some real thin, maybe 16th or 8th inch plates, whatever I have on hand. Because in here somewhere I'm going to need to put a dip tube for the suction on the fuel tank. And this is suction and this is return. So I'm going to need to port a return in here as well. So there's going to have to be some modifications done to this tank. So I'll go and get this fuel tank cleaned out, and I'm going to get this cut out and I'll show you more. So I don't recommend cutting into a fuel tank, guys. Never do it. But if you're going to do it, just be careful, because the off gases can flash and make things go boom. So anyway, I rinsed this like 4 times with water and Dawn dish soap just to get some of the fumes out of there. And then what I do is I take my handy dandy arm extender with this Bernzomatic torch, and I stand, what is this, like 7 feet away, and I'll poke the torch in there. That way if there's any fumes, they'll off gas and they'll flash off before there's any issue. But diesel fuel tanks, guys, are much different. Diesel fuel, the jelliness or whatever can actually soak into the pores of the metal, and you have to heat the tanks to get the impurities out. So anyway, just be careful if you're doing this. I don't recommend doing this, but I've done a bunch of fuel tanks over the years, and you just got to be careful. So here we are, we got a big hole in the tank now, and I probably would have been fine if I just had hammered that a little bit more, but if you look right here, all that metal was starting to, like, it gets really porous before it breaks. So anyway, I felt like, to avoid a potential leak, because all it is just this seam right here is spot welded with like a crimping weld. So anyway, I'm going to weld this all up really nice, and then this will be, I think, the best solution. This will be just a flat plate across here, and I'll make some nice plates to fill in the sides, and I don't see why that won't work. And here we can see there's going to be tons and tons and tons of clearance, which I will love. And on the outside, the tank will look pretty much stock, which is kind of the way I'm looking to go here. I want to keep this looking as stock as I can, like as if Ford had actually built this unit. So there we can see, once this is all together, there's going to be tons and tons of clearance. I've been doing some brainstorming behind the scenes. So this is a 1/2 inch NPT weld-in bung. I got these from McMaster & Carr. The idea is I'm going to weld these below the level of this tank, so that way the fittings that come out of here are going to be nice and almost flush. See, we've got the fuel sending unit here. I'm going to put the dip tube right here so it doesn't mess with the level of float. And I'm going to put the return back in here so that returning fuel doesn't play with that sending unit. I mean, all that much. It will to some degree, but either that or up here. I haven't quite decided. A 1/2 inch NPT to 6 AN elbow here. 90-degree elbow if I can get my stuff together here to get this started. So what we're going to do is, because this is going to stick up too high from the tank, so I'm going to take in a piece of pipe, you know, similar to this, and weld it to the bung, and then I'll cut that off and it will be like up here, and then I can weld that into the tank. So this will be below the level of the tank. That way this is a -8 line, but you get the idea. That way this is pretty much flush with the tank. Because we don't have a ton of clearance right here. As it is, we might be in trouble with the dashboard that goes over here. So anyway, a lot of talking, I know, and a lot of disoriented stuff here, but I'll show you more as I get it. I cut some little pieces of this round tubing that was left over from my steering gearbox, and I turned it on the lathe, and I made a nice bevel. And this is, I put thread sealer on here just so it'll be the proper depth that it's going to be when it's tight. And I made this piece here, so I'm going to fill this with weld down here, cut a hole in the tank, and then this will sit basically flush with the top of the tank. See that? So now this will be, it'll be kind of recessed. It'll look kind of neat. When it comes to the fuel system, I need a dip tube, which is what this is. So this is a PACCAR, which is basically Peterbilt. The part number is D4025-3902. So as you can see, this is a 1/2 inch NPT with a -8 fitting. It's kind of a happy coincidence that this fuel tank sits so well on the front of this zero turn. It's kind of like a little vise. That's kind of cool. So anyway, used this step drill to drill a hole. Okay, so now you can finally see what I was talking about, having this NPT bung recessed. That is just about as low as you can possibly get it to the tank. That's just kind of sitting in there. It's not welded or anything yet. I've got this welded in there. It's still hot, so I probably shouldn't point too close at it. But as you can see, that is nice and recessed. That's what it looks like underneath. That's pretty much the end result. This is obviously still loose. That'll go one more full rotation tighter, so it'll be even closer. But I'm very happy with the way that turned out. It's very low profile. See, it's just about as high as the rib on this fuel tank, maybe just a smidge higher. But the dashboard opens up right here and gets taller where like the gauges are. So this should be just about right. And so when it comes to this draw straw, this is a -10. I thought it was a -8. So anyway, I had to go get this -10 to -8 reducer. So now this threads on here like that. Real nice. Now I can use my -8 line. So this is a little bulky now, bulkier than I wanted, but I still think that's going to be pretty good. I don't want to reduce this and get a smaller fitting, because someday if I need bigger fuel line, I can just take the adapter off and boom, I've got -10 AN ready to rock and roll. Using the same process as the return, I recessed that fitting, and this is about, this can still turn more, but basically I just put that on there to see how the clearance was. I added also a lot of extra weld around here because I was worried about this straw vibrating around, but now that it's in there, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I'm going to cut just a little bit of a notch there. There's a good bit of clearance, and from what I can tell, that's the lowest spot of the tank. So I mean, it's just about perfect for what I want. And I was just looking back on some pictures, and you can see this line right here. That's pretty much going to go, once this fitting is straight, that's going to go right across the top of here. That's the dashboard where it sits. So this should have plenty of room. I don't think it's going to hit. So that's what I've got, guys. This is the fuel system plumbed and ready. Obviously, I'm going to get a new sending unit. We'll do that later. If I ever want to increase the fuel line diameter, I can easily go to -10, and I could get another fitting here and go to -8 if I really wanted to. I've got to clean those up just a little bit, but that is what we're left with. And as we can see here, that's the return port right there. That might mess with the float arm just a little bit, but I'm not really too worried about it. I'm gonna know if there's fuel in this thing or not. So anyway, we are done up there. Now we can start welding in the bottom of this tank and making it tight. As you can see, I've kind of got a notch cut out of it. So that way, whenever this thing is tightened down, it's going to face like this. So the lowest part of this is going to face kind of the front of the tank, and then the bigger part is going to face the drip, kind of like where this comes downhill. I just kind of figured that might be the best bet. So this is my first patch panel template. Let's go get that turned into steel. Alright, so this is one last look inside the tank before it gets shut. This is a good view of those bungs that I welded in. As you can see, inside the tank is actually really clean. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, let's go ahead and get this patched up. Before I go ahead and weld this whole bottom of the tank in, I put the tank on here just to kind of simulate what it's going to look like. And as you can see, we have tons and tons of clearance, which it's going to make this look really clean from the outside because it looks just like an original tank. So, very happy about that. As you can see, my bolts are in, holding the tank. And I've got tons of clearance. So I went and put this line on here just to kind of see what it would look like. And that's where it's going to go, right to this top port. And I'm very happy with that. So the other one is going to come from here and then just basically run right down. So that's going to be so clean, so smooth. I'll make a bracket here to hold these. And I'll probably even weld something on top of this tank to support this fuel line. That way there's a clamp here and a clamp here. That way there's no rubbing anywhere. And I'm just happy to see this thing coming along. This is going to be awesome. So here it is all welded in. I'm going to have to go over and just look at every one of these welds really closely to make sure that everyone is sound and is not porous. But that's it. Pretty much that's all welded in. Alright, so I went ahead and welded that little brace in there. Now I probably don't need that. It's probably overkill, but I wanted to kind of mimic the factory seam here. That was done for a reason because there is a lot of weight in this tank. This is a 20-gallon fuel tank. Diesel fuel is around 7.1 pounds per gallon. So if you figure this is a full tank, this thing's going to be 142, somewhere in that. Almost 150 pounds. And that could easily deform an area of the tank if you're bouncing around a field, you know, and you have that weight. Alright, so as you can see, we have the clearance. We've got tons and tons of room in there. As you can see, I'm moving this tank every which way, and that rib is not going to hit anything. We still have oodles of room. Plus, in my opinion, it looks very strong. Alright, so this is my fuel sending ring here. And as you can see, I do have some rust right there. It's really thin right in there. I don't know if you can see that very well, but there's rust all the way through. Alright, so I did a little bit of welding here, and I think I was able to save this ring. As you can see here, we kind of got it to the point where it can grab, kind of like a little finger. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I think I'm going to order just one of these sending units that fits right in the tank here. I think that'll be fine. I could always put some of that sealer in there just so that we don't have a leak. But I'm thinking that's gonna work all right. I'll just get a new ring. We'll be back in business. All right, so I know this is kind of difficult to do with one hand here, but basically I'm trying to find out the ohm range of this fuel sending unit, and this is quite wore out. But from what I'm kind of seeing is that, like, right there, okay, so that's like 45, 60, it's going up. So 500 ohms, it's definitely not supposed to have that many. 70 ohms there. I think it's supposed to be about 300 range. So I think it's like a 30 to 300 ohm sender. So 30 is full, 300 is empty. So anyway, I'm going to try to find a gauge that I can use with this sending unit. Finish up this fuel tank. I got a new locking ring, gasket, and over here I got a new float and sending unit. This is a copper float, which I thought was kind of cool. I'm going to test this to show you what the ohm rating is. This stuff came from this company here. This is the first time I've used them. 256 ohms empty, 33 ohms full. This was the last test before, basically before I was done welding. I had to make sure that this lip that I welded on was going to work, which it does perfectly. So now I can take the fuel sending unit back out, and I can put some fuel in the tank, and I can test for leaks. So this looks a little silly, but basically I've got the fuel tank here supported so that the bottom where I welded in is pretty much totally submerged in fuel. I've got diesel fuel in the tank right now, and I'm just kind of keeping an eye on all the welded seams, trying to see if there's going to be any leaks or anything. So we'll keep an eye on this for a couple hours. And as you can see, where I welded that in is totally submerged with fuel, probably only like half a gallon of fuel. All right, so here we are. I had to flush the tank again and do some more welding. I'm not perfect, even though I like to think I am sometimes, but I'm not perfect. There was a couple leaks. So I re-welded the entire thing. Hopefully now we won't have an issue. The welds look a little bit more bubbly, but like I said, I had to weld over all of this. So I'm hoping now no leaks. It's full of water. I didn't put diesel fuel in again because I learned from my last mistake. It took forever to flush the tank out again after I put diesel fuel in there. So I was kind of a little cocky, thinking that I was gonna, do it first attempt with no leaks. So I put diesel fuel in. Come to find out that was a bad move. So anyway, flushed the fuel tank out, took forever. Finished welding it. Now it's sitting here. I'm going to leave it for a couple hours and see if there's leaks. I've got like a couple gallons of water in there, so let's see. Here we are a bunch of hours later. Cardboard was dry, so I swapped out the water for diesel fuel. Diesel fuel has a habit of finding small cracks. It kind of seeps into the metal a little bit more than water does. So anyway, we're gonna see if there's any leaks, and hopefully not. Hopefully we can get this primed, painted, assembled, and on the tractor. That would be awesome. Be done with this thing. All right, so this is my contraption here to paint this tank. This tank had diesel fuel in it for about a day and a half and not a single drop anywhere, so finally got it. Now I've got a coat of primer on there. We're gonna go ahead and get some blue. The reason this is attached to the four-wheeler like this is because it's winter time now. I'm not able to paint outside without really smoking up the shop, and I don't really want the fumes in there, so I basically just back the four-wheeler out, paint it real quick, and then drive it back in so that it can dry. So anyway, this works. It's been a couple days now. I've got the nice coat of blue on there, and it is pretty much totally dry. So I'm gonna go ahead and start putting these fittings in, sending unit, and I'm gonna put this on the tractor. Very excited to see what it looks like, and we'll go from there. This is the only pipe dope that I use when I'm dealing with petroleum. Pretty much the only thing that I know of that is good for petroleum-based applications. All right, so we've gone ahead and got these fittings all buttoned up and everything's ready to go for the most part. I will get a clamp for this so I can use this bracket. We've got the fuel sending unit in there. I just checked it with an ohm meter. That should be all set. That's about 30 ohms empty. It's pretty much all done, guys. Ready to assemble and put on the tractor. I may have to adjust these just a little bit to aim them in the right spot, but very happy. So this is what I believe the solution for our starter issues. This is a Molly MS291. This sucker is designed for a New Holland TM series tractor. And there's the part number, AZF4146. Now this bad boy is a gear reduction, 4.2 kilowatts. So this is a very stout starter. This is brand new, not a rebuilt. So this thing should have all the torque needed to turn this motor over. So this has a smaller bolt pattern that will fit the tractor style bell housing, identical to the original Ford 5000 starter, which I have here. As you can see, this has the smaller bolt holes. Now, I have a brand new starter, but this one is way too small to turn over that big 6-cylinder. This is the original starter that was on the engine. This was a 37MT Delco Remy. And as you can see, we've got quite a bit still smaller starter. However, this I believe is a direct drive, and this is a planetary reduction. So this should be a pretty torquey little starter. So all of these starters are the 10-tooth pinion that we need for this flywheel. So this, in all theory, should bolt right on and be the perfect solution. This is the starter shim that Carl provided me whenever I bought this clutch flywheel assembly. And this is so that the gear, the pinion gear on the starter, this right here, doesn't dig into the back of the flywheel. There is a shoulder that the starter would bottom out on if you didn't use that shim. And hopefully there won't be any issues and I'll be having a good starter first try. Wouldn't that be awesome? And that fits just perfect. Look at that. Awesome. Nope, twisted on us. Well, the good news is it fits. I don't have to cut anything or move anything. That's awesome. Well, I've gone ahead and replaced, or I will replace, these are the original 3/8 bolts. I've gone ahead and replaced us with a slightly longer one. That way there'll be plenty of engagement. As you can see, that's much more suited for this application. I'm going to hook up some cables to this at some point just to verify that the starter does turn the engine over. And once we get a fuel system hooked up, I think we can start this engine for the first time since it's been in the tractor. So here we are, the old engine. I need this plate. I believe this is going to bolt to the back of the new engine. Obviously, I can't use the battery tray because I've got a big, massive intake that's in the way. But we're going to try first before we go ahead and take it off. The pin that holds this battery box is kind of difficult to get out. I just got it freed up, as you can see, by holding a pair of vice grips down here. I'm going to try to drive that pin up and out so that I can get this tray off of here. So that's all that holds that battery tray. That's the bracket that I need right there. There. That's the piece that I need. Here we have the head from the new engine. And as you can see, we've got the same bolt pattern. I'm going to save this motor hook just in case I need to remove this engine again. But basically, the new one will bolt right on there. Looks like I'm just going to have to trim this bracket just a little bit, but that's going to fit right there. It's going to be sweet. Just a little bit of clearancing and we are good to go. That fits on there pretty nice. So As you can see now, this bolts on top of the tank, and this is what holds the hood, the dash, together. This bracket over here is for the dashboard too. So this is all awesome that it fits, because that's going to save a lot of time in mocking like brackets and everything. See, this is the other bracket that goes for the hood, or I guess you're calling it the dashboard, whatever the piece is that goes over the top of the tank. That bracket's going to hold that, and these brackets, once these are all together, are going to hold the tin around the tank. And also this is the upper tank mount. Pretty cool. And on this side of the tractor, we can see that there's no way that my battery tray is going to fit with this intake. Maybe someday down the road I can get a new intake and I can do some fab work, and I can make intake runners maybe come at a different angle. But for right now, I'm not dealing with that. I want to get this thing rolling, and with the intake that's on here. Don't ever get injured, guys. It sucks trying to work on stuff. Alright, so I got the fuel tank on there. A couple things though I will note. This bracket that bolted to the back of the head actually sits up higher than the original engine. But the fuel tank is in the right location because we're using this for the steering box and this bolt for the steering box. So the clearancing that I've done is perfect. The only problem is this piece that I unbolted from the tractor and bolted on this is not going to work just as is. I'm going to have to do some modification, which is not the end of the world. This is the old engine here, and as you can see, this whole head is lower, so the block is shorter than the 7.8. So as a result, this just sits up a little higher, even though it has the same bolt pattern and it fit. And we can still use that piece. We're just going to have to modify it. So effectively, we can still use these arms. I'm just going to have to cut them off and weld them probably down on the bottom. So this will be lower. And I'm going to have to do something different with this one. It's definitely not ideal, and I'm going to have to bring this down as well. But luckily, I've got the space there to do it. So it's not the end of the world. But I was kind of hoping it would be more of a direct bolt-on type scenario. Alright, so I've got this piece in the vise, and we're going to just take and cut that right along that line, move it down, and then re-weld it, and that's going to be our bracket for the fuel tank. So I've got this piece flipped around, and here's what I'm left with. That should be a pretty strong bracket, and I've got some more material here in case I want to reinforce this or gusset this further. Fuel tank is on there now. I got the bolts all tightened down, so you can see that bracket. That works pretty darn good. And from the side, it looks just like it was supposed to from the factory. You can't really tell that the bottom was cut out of it until you look in there real close. Alright, so here you see I've got my lines on. -6 for the return, -8 for the feed. I welded a little bracket here. As you can, it's a little piece of angle iron, so I could use these clamps. And I used one of the original holes for, it used to be the something to do with the ignition on the old tractor. That goes to the intake tube. This is the return. So I just cracked one of the lines so I could get this primer working. And look at that nasty black fluid that was in there. Look at that. I'm really surprised this thing was running as good as it was, because that fluid right there, look at that. It's like oil. I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but look at that. It's like it's like black, like waste oil almost. I wonder what he was running. Unless that's, it smells like clean diesel fuel. It's just, it does not look like it, that's for sure. Alright, so I've got that fuel line tightened up now. I've got a lot of fuel up to this point. Now we're going to go up to this point before the fuel filters. I'm going to change out the fuel filters, see if we can get fuel up to this point. Then we'll bleed it here. And then we'll go, actually, to the return on the injection pump. So we'll fill the whole injection pump and then bleed it at the return. Just think how good this engine is going to run with some nice clean diesel fuel in it. That stuff looks like it has a tiny tint of green to it. My guess is that's a lot of algae and just junk from the fuel tank of the truck. So anyway, now we've got a brand new fuel system. We're going to have very clean diesel fuel. Have 2 new fuel filters, and then we'll go from there. So this filter here is the first one from the fuel tank. Let's see what this puppy looks like. Mercy. It's off-road diesel in there. I saw some red. That doesn't look too bad. Oh, maybe it does. Goodness, this guy must have had some nasty fuel up in there. This is what fuel is supposed to look like. So that first filter was taking most of the crap out of the fuel, but he was running off-road diesel fuel. So I'm just gonna see how many pumps it takes. Dang, that didn't take very long. Now that I've got fuel to the filter housing, I'm gonna go ahead and crack this return line on the injection pump, and I'm gonna get fuel up to the return line. And at that point, because this engine was running before, the fuel lines themselves should have diesel fuel already in them, so I bet this thing will fire right over. Beautiful. That's clean fuel, not off-road, which is kind of funny because there was off-road up to that whole pump. Alright, let's button this back up, and I think I'm going to try to fire this thing over. I've gone ahead and I put the downpipe from the truck back on the tractor, and I've just got my little rain cap here. That way I can just kind of keep an eye on the exhaust and see what's going on while I'm trying to get this thing started. I've gone ahead and put the power steering line back on. It's just going to dangle here. I'll put a bucket just because I don't want power steering fluid shooting into the intake when I try to run this. That's just the return. I'm not going to run the water pump. I'm not going to run this for very long. I just want to hear if all the critical functions work. PTO, put it in gear, see if everything wants to move. Because if I do have to go backwards, guys, if I do got to take this engine back out of this thing, I'm going to be very upset. But I'd rather know it now than later. I've got my battery here, just temporary. I've got the cables. I'm going to hook up just one wire here so I can touch it on the positive and I can see what's happening. We're going to go ahead and put this thing in neutral just so we don't have any surprises. The neighbors are up there drilling a well, so hopefully the sound doesn't get impacted too badly, but it's a beautiful day today. I'm ready to fire this thing up. So I've got pretty much everything hooked up. This is going to be my contact for the positive. I'm just going to see first if the starter engages. That was awesome. It sounded really good. We've got life like right there. Oh man. All right. I gotta figure out how to shut this thing down in an emergency. I'm gonna go get a block of wood. I'll be right back. I kind of forgot that I had plastic covering the intake, and that was that popping noise that you heard. All right, so I've got a block of wood here. In case this thing starts running away, I can cover the turbo, shut everything right down. That wood won't get sucked into the turbo. Guys, we are so close to firing this thing up. Pretty anxious here now. Hopefully everything works and I don't have to deal with taking anything back apart. So, let's see what happens here. I am excited. Hope everything works. Power steering is leaking. So I'm glad I put that hose on there. It's making a mess. I should have put a catch pan underneath it. I just want to look before I run it for too long, because that was the first fire up in this tractor. Wow, that thing ran. It seemed to run decent. Let's try it again.
So this thing's just burning off a little water vapor just because it's been sitting for so long. It's got a lot of steam and vapor. I just wanted to check the hydraulics. All that stuff still works. The PTO, there it goes. Very happy right now.
I think it's time to take off this fan post now. This was making a wicked squealing noise too. Whenever I had the truck running, you guys could hear that squealing noise. That was this bearing. So anyway, the only way I could use this would be if I put the alternator on this side, but we've got the radiator hose that's going to be here, and I feel like this side is pretty congested. So I think we're going to have to use this water pump to put the alternator right in here somewhere. Looks as though this thing has had a relatively recent water pump. But as you can see, this is kind of the whole truck water pump system. I know this will all unbolt somehow and you can swap over a tractor water pump system, but I haven't been able to find any information and I don't have a donor tractor to look at. So I'm thinking we're gonna leave it. As much as I would like to save room. This is a dual thermostat. You know, it's kind of a nice housing. This is not drilled and tapped for a mechanical fan. The fan was up here on that piece I just took off on the truck. Maybe I could put a fan here if I can get more room for the radiator. But as of right now, it's like extremely tight, even way up in here. So I've got to put some plugs in. I've got a bunch of accessories that need plugs. I'm going to take these hoses off right here too. Those don't need to be on there for right now. So anyway, guys, that's just kind of the bare engine now. And if anyone has any information on what you can do with the pulley system up here, like the water pump, the water accessories on the top, you know, for the thermostat housing, the heat riser, whatever you want to call this, and also this heat exchanger. I don't know if that's, because it looks like that water pump is kind of integral to this heat exchanger. I don't think that can be removed. So anyway, let me know, guys. So I'm just kind of throwing some stuff together here to get an idea of what's possible. I have a scrap piece of 5/8 left over and some aluminum here. I just kind of put those in there as spacers, and I could turn that down and make a really nice bushing. So anyway, I did that on both sides, and let me just show you what that looks like. So here we can see we've got a really nice gap for a belt, and you know, it sits up higher, so that way this coolant line is slightly below the level where the tank is going to be full. That should keep air from getting trapped in there. And it kind of picks the radiator up quite a bit. However, I kind of like the look of that, and I'm just going to put the shroud on there to see what it looks like. So that didn't really work, guys. I had to kind of push the radiator back quite a bit because this was hitting, and I could cut this all out. That's not a big deal, but I don't really want to do that unless I absolutely have to, because this is the original tin and I really don't want to hurt it. So this can go back just a little ways like that, and that fills up, you know, the shell pretty good, and I wouldn't mind having that angled. Like the radiator could be angled back and it wouldn't hurt a thing. It just wouldn't work if I had a manual fan. So now I've got some more thinking to do. I guess I could bring this ahead just a little bit. Now it's finally time to pull this air breather out of there. That's going to be of no good to me. The turbo air cleaner is 4 inches and this is only 2, so we're gonna have to do something totally different with the air cleaner. And this is one of those oil bath air cleaners. This is actually a pretty good air cleaner, but fortunately it's not gonna work. So this comes off, 3 bolts, this whole thing comes out. I lied, there was actually 4 bolts. You know, anyway, that's all out of there. Now I have an empty grill shell, and we have a cool old air cleaner that I might be able to use for another project down the road. The radiator's just kind of sitting in there right now. As you can see, it's pretty much hitting the harmonic balancer, so that's no good. So we'll have to bring it ahead just a little bit more. But I wanted to show you I mean, it's a pretty darn tight fit in there. Definitely don't think we're going to be able to run a manual fan. And this radiator shroud is using the original bolts, so it's kind of right where it's got to be. So we're really close, guys, to having a radiator fit this tractor. Now, this might be difficult to make these hoses, but I think we could make something work. So this is going to have to come up and ahead just a little bit. So I'm kind of toying with the idea of putting the radiator up a lot higher than it used to be, because quite frankly, we got a lot of area up here that's not being used, and I've got a lot of room down there for the belt now, which, you know, it's not really that bad in my opinion. And the great thing about that is the water level can be higher than this intercooler right here. So at the very least, I could put the water up a little bit higher, that way the air won't get trapped in here. So I'm kind of toying with that idea, but I'm going to build a bracket, I think, using the original radiator bolts. This was all that held the original radiator on, just 2 bolts. And so I used the original radiator rested up against this housing. So it rested up against this, and that's kind of what kept it stable. Sorry, my truck's making all kinds of noise over there, guys. So this is where we're at. Got a nice gap down there. I did have to move the shroud ahead about 1 inch. See that? It's just about 1 inch ahead of where we're at. And that radiator is pretty much straight up and down, which is kind of better than I was hoping for. I could just re-drill the holes here and move that whole shroud ahead. I'm thinking that's kind of what I might do, because I really don't want to cut this up. It'd be easy to weld on a piece and drill a new hole, and then if I ever wanted to go back to the original position for some reason, I would still have everything without being cut up. The only thing I would have to cut would be just a little bit of webbing here so that I could have better airflow, and maybe make a shroud of some kind on the front. So that's kind of where we're at. This is just sitting there. Everything's just sitting here. Nothing's confirmed. And that radiator, I like the look of that, how it kind of sits up much higher and I can still get to the cap easy. Also, another thing is we don't have a hood that's the right length. So I could put this anywhere and it's going to be fine, because I'm going to have to make my new hood anyways. I'll probably end up getting a new mesh, but that'll bring it out closer to this weight bracket for the 6610, so that there won't be a gap there. I think that's a really clean look. As much as I would love to use this original fan shroud, I don't think it's going to be able to happen, simply because this is the bottom of the radiator. That would clear, but the problem is the water pump is not at the center line of the radiator now. And if I bring the radiator down, the harmonic balancer is going to hit, because this sticks out, you know, a good 3 inches. So I could cut this, sure, but at the end of the day, I don't think the fan is going to clear this harmonic balancer. So I'm going to have to use an electric fan, I think. So I went ahead and took the fan off the old motor, and first of all, it doesn't sit on that center pivot of the water pump. And what happens is if we try to line it up close, that would hit. So that's just a little too big. And I could probably get a smaller diameter fan, you know, and try to make that work, but I just don't think it's worth it. Not really sure what I'm going to do yet. So anyway, all right, so we're just going to try out this new microphone that I've got, because some people didn't like my breathing noises I was making. Anyway, let's try this and see if it makes a difference. I have just been using a GoPro without a microphone for like 3 years, so I finally updated. We'll see if this makes a difference. We'll see if this makes a difference in audio content. So here we are. This is the radiator I've been working with. And, you know, I was just looking at this going, this thing is so small. This is like a 3-core radiator. There is not a lot of cooling potential here for a big, massive turbo 6-cylinder engine. So I got looking to see what was on the market for bigger radiators. I came across this bad boy. This is for a Ford 6610. This was advertised as a 5-core radiator. So this radiator should be a direct fit for this radiator. Obviously, this is much thicker. This is 5 cores. This is enough to cool a turbocharged 4-cylinder diesel and a naturally aspirated 6-cylinder diesel. So anyway, we've got oil coolers down here, which will probably not be used. Here we can see the two radiators side by side, and you can definitely tell a difference. The tanks are the same width, but this is roughly 1 3/4 inch thick. I'm not measuring this, I'm talking about the actual fin. The inside dimension of that is right around, let's just call it 2 inches. The one over here is 3 inches. So there's a whole inch thicker. This radiator has a whole inch thicker core than this one does. So that's kind of cool. Plus, the bottom of these radiators is constructed the same. I'll show you that. Inlets are the same, the radiator caps are the same, the bottom hoses are the same, like pretty much everything is the same except this one's a lot thicker. As you can see here, these were the locks for the carriage bolts. Oh, come on. Those fit in there just perfect. This is the old radiator, and this is the new radiator. And as you can see, they still fit in there just perfect. So this should mount just about the same as the old one. So with this bigger radiator, it's even more of a tight fit than it was before. As you can see now, we've got a big gap there. I'm going to have to do something. It's looking like I'm going to have to trim this right here and this right there where that permanent marker is, so that I can get this grill shell back. And I've also had to bring the radiator up a little bit more, so we're using like every inch of clearance that we have, but I think this is the solution. So anyway, we're getting there, guys. So I cut that part of the brace on this side and that side, and that has given us plenty of room to get back to where we were here, which was just like an inch ahead, which is where I want to stay. But now the problem is I'm going to have to cut out a lot of this webbing right in here so that the radiator is not blocked, and I think that'll get us, you know, that'll be most of the way in here. So I'm going to cut a lot of this out, which I didn't really want to do, but I don't really have a lot of options here. This intercooler right here, or the heat exchanger, the coolant needs to be above that level just so that it doesn't have bubbles and air pockets. But for the most part, we also can't go down very far because the radiator is hitting here, and it will hit there if it goes down further. So I'll show you guys more. So I've gone ahead and cut this out, or began to cut this out, and I feel bad cutting into this original tin, but it's kind of the only way we can make this happen, and we're very committed at this point. I don't think I'm going to turn around and put the 4-cylinder back in. Here we go, guys. That's what it looks like. Pretty happy with that. I still got some more trimming to do to make it all work perfect, but that's going to make a really nice flowing shroud. And as you can see here, the radiator is pretty much tucked in, like as close as we can possibly get it. In fact, I'm even going to have the notch right here just so that the radiator cap can be removed. So we are using like every possible inch of this fan shroud. So here's my solution to this radiator bracket. I used what I made, that shim stack that you saw, like with these aluminum pucks. I was going to use this, but I didn't like the way that was going to be, so I took some time off camera and I made this bracket. That will sit just like that, and as you can see, I put the radiator in the tractor and welded this so it's the perfect angle. And I think this is going to be a lot better solution than what I had with those, you know, those pieces I had stacked all together. So anyway, let me show you what this looks like on the tractor. So, as you can see, this bracket fits down there perfectly, and it lines up with the holes and everything. So the radiator will sit right on this bracket, and it will be held the perfect height and the space for the belt to go by for the harmonic balancer. And also the grill shell fits on there just perfect. So let me show you, I'll get this thing painted up, and I'll put the radiator in there and show you what that looks like. So check it out, guys. We've gone ahead and painted this bracket. It's had time to dry. Mount this on the radiator, and I'll show you what that looks like. Gone ahead and mounted this back to the radiator now, and as you can see, that's a pretty nice fit. I've gone ahead and put these plugs in the oil cooler because I do not want to have anything getting in those in case I want to use those someday. They'll be nice and clean. So this is a hydraulic flare fitting. Looks like this, and it has, you know, usually the tube goes through and it's flared on this end, and then the nut tightens down the flare. Anyway, what I did was I filled that with weld, painted it, and then just put that in there, and that's going to be enough for this application. So I'm going to go ahead now and put this thing back in the tractor. So we've got that radiator bolted in place. No, this is not permanent. I'm sure this is going to be in and out of there a dozen times. But as you can see, I've got enough clearance there for a 1/2-inch belt to go through there, so I don't have to take off the radiator whenever I do a belt. This thing, you know, it just kind of balances there. It's not really, nothing holds this until the grill shell is in place. As you can see, it's about 20 degrees. For all you Celsius boys out there, I don't know what that is. This is Fahrenheit because this is America. So anyways, 20 degrees, but if this thing could measure wind chill, well, I'll tell you what, it is cold. So anyway, next thing, the grill shell needs to be adjusted so that will bolt on. We'll go from there. Okay, when it comes to this grill shell, I welded on this piece right here so that I could oblong these holes. This is what it used to look like. More or less just took a washer, ground it out, and then welded that on there like that. Now, if I ever want to change this back to the original position, I can just cut that off. We're all set. All I'm going to do here is drill a new hole right in there. I'll measure that to get the spacing proper, and then that's all the adjustment I'm going to have to do for this to fit the new radiator. This is what we're left with. 2 spaces, pretty even on both sides. That's going to allow us to move this grill shell ahead just about 1 inch. So now I can put that back on there and figure out the rest of the stuff I got to figure out. When it comes to alternators on this thing, this is the old alternator that came off the truck, so I figured why not use this one again. It's pretty beefy. I believe it to be like a 100 amp alternator, somewhere in that range. It's a 2-wire, an early 2-wire system, which is pretty. It does have an external voltage regulator. However, I've got this set up to this battery. As you can see, we've got like 12.5 volts. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to test this alternator, make sure this thing is functioning the way it should. And then, if it does work, why not use this one? I mean, it's already here. I'd say that's charging, 14.2 volts. Awesome. So 12.5. Yeah, so that works good. Why not use that one? I've even got this cool adjuster here. I don't know if I can reuse that. I'm going to try to. So anyway, I'm going to start making some provisions now that I got the radiator on there to get this on the tractor. To overcome the mounting obstacle, I'm going to need something like this. This is the original bracket. I tried using this, by the way, but there just wasn't enough room. So I need something like this right here to put in here so that I can start to make my mount. So I've got some inch and a half round bar. We're going to put on the lathe, and we're going to machine this out so that then we can have a piece to insert there. This is a sleeve right here, so that can tighten down. And I think that's going to be the first step, because I'm going to have to custom make a total. Everything has to be custom on this. So I'd like to use this alternator just because this is a really easy to find alternator. And they're rebuildable. They're a little big, but I think it'll work if I can just get a bracket going. So let's get started. So we just gone ahead and bored 4 inches into this 1.25 inch bar. I'm gonna just face this real quick and make it pretty, and then I'll cut it off, make it the proper length, and we'll have our bushing. This is a 1/2 inch drill bit, by the way. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this thing off, and then I can face this end like I did here, and we're gonna have our new piece. Here's my new spacer, and I may change this depending on what happens, but basically that can go in there like that, and I can either weld to this, or I can either cut this down shorter and put a bracket in here, whatever I got to do to make this support work. So, all right guys, so this is kind of the part of the project that takes the longest. It's just fitting all these pieces. I cut out a piece of 5/16, and I've got this piece here where the old front engine lift point used to be. And I'm trying to line up the alternator so that I can make a bracket. And obviously I had to put the hood back on to make sure that nothing hit. So anyway, I'll show you what this bracket looks like, but I'm constantly having to like tack stuff together, take it back apart, put it together, you know, so I'm doing a lot of this stuff like twice, but I just wanted to take the time and show you how sweet that is. Obviously, this is going to have to come out this way and then up so it doesn't, you know, discolor the hood. But look how close we are. It is just, it is so close. And like this, I might have to put like I might have to either bend this, but I love how tight this hood is. It makes everything look like it should be. So I've got the alternator kind of mocked up there. I built this one bracket. As you can see, I've only got one side of this on, but I've got a piece of wood holding the alternator up just to kind of get a visual. The belt is, it's hard to see this in this sun, but the belt is pretty much perfect. This is going to be the final location. It's going to be really close. So the alternator is going to pivot kind of on the top and it's going to adjust on the bottom, as you can see right there. And this will probably be about where the alternator is when it's tightened. So not perfect, but the hood covers, and you know, I could do something else later, but for right now I think that's going to be semi-permanent. Plus the turbo sticks off the side, so it's really not that big of a deal in my eyes that the alternator sticks out a little bit. So anyway, one thing I also wanted to mention, this fuel filter housing is going to have to move down there because I can't close the hood with it there. So anyway, that's another obstacle. Obstacles. We've got tons of obstacles that we have to overcome to make these things happen, but we'll get there. All right, guys, so here is what I've come up with so far. This bracket, I used some of these bolt holes that held on the old fan hub, and I made a nice little swoop and I welded onto this piece that I made. Now, as you can see, this alternator is just going to pivot and adjust just like that, and the hood will clear and we're all happy. However, I feel like I need some more stiffening. I'm not quite sure why I feel this way, but I feel like it needs something else on here. So this is what I came up with for the top bracket of the alternator. As you can see, it's probably way overkill, but this is the original pivot bracket. As you can see, there's quite a bit of metal there. That is a big chunk. So anyway, we've got this piece here that's going to have support this way, and then this piece ties in all the way up here with these 7/16 bolts, and I welded this all together. So I'm going to try to integrate the original tensioner because I think that's a really nice design, but there's kind of nothing down here to tie that to, so I'm going to have to get creative for that bracket. That's part of the reason why I wanted to have this so strong, so that this could hold a lot of the tension of that alternator as well. It's not supposed to get above 14 degrees, and that's Fahrenheit, guys. We're not Celsius here. 14 degrees is pretty darn cold. We've got a week ahead of us with that, so I don't think I'll be getting much done out here. My fingers get pretty darn cold, and the shop's too busy, so I can't really bring it in right now, so we will press on. If you watch these videos, guys, you'll notice that in the background the seasons change a lot. As you can see here, we got about a foot of snow dumped on us last night with some pretty heavy drifting. So anyway, I can't really do much whenever it's like this and the shop's been too busy. I can't bring this tractor inside, so it'll be another week or so before I can touch this thing. So that's why it takes so long to make these videos, guys, because I'm a one guy. I can only do so much, and I'm at the mercy of the weather out here because I don't have enough facility to put this thing inside and leave it inside. So anyway, if you keep an eye on these videos, you'll notice in the background the seasons are always changing. We've got, you know, leaves falling, we've got summer, we've got winter, we've got it all. So anyway, just wanted to take a minute to show that. All right, so I know I don't show a lot of the fabrication and the steps that go into making these parts, but here is one thing that I've been working on. This is the lower alternator bracket. I had to butcher the original one. This is part of the original one. Anyway, I had to flip it around so that it would work underneath the alternator. As you can see, this is kind of what we got going on here. I cut this out. I'm going to weld that in, but I got to go to the tractor first to make sure That's the right angle. And then now what's going to happen is the original adjuster, this thing right here, and I don't have enough hands. This is the original tensioner that will adjust that alternator, and I'm going to use this over again because I think that's kind of a cool design. Okay, so check it out, guys. This is the finished alternator setup, and as you can see, this is how this works. Obviously you'd be tightening this to adjust it, but I've just got it all loose right now so you can kind of see how it works. Pretty slick setup in my opinion. Plus this kind of, it'll probably stay right about there, halfway in that tensioner. It doesn't look terrible for what it is. So here's all the parts before paint. I used the flappy wheel on the grinder to get them that smooth. And I'm pretty happy with that. That kind of looks pretty darn factory if I do say so myself. Gonna go paint these parts. And this is what we're left with after paint. Looks pretty nice in my opinion. Looks kind of like a factory thing. So we're gonna go ahead and get this on the tractor and then we can work on the next thing. Got a little blue on the engine, just a splash of color to tune it up a little bit. Now I've got to worry about this brace. There was a brace that connected this trim to the engine so that, you know, this would have a little more structure. And I'll show you what that looks like on the tractor. Over here at the engine we can see this is a piece that I was talking about. This is what holds the grill shell in place on each side. So I'm going to have to take this off and see. I'll probably end up having to cut this and modify and make some of my own brackets, but we're going to use this. Bolts to the head right there. So this is the piece that I got off the front of that engine. So I made a real simple bracket, used the alternator bracket as a point, and there we go. That's our grill stiffener for this side. I'll do the other side as well. I just wanted to show you guys, this alternator is pretty much all done. Obviously the bolts aren't in there permanently yet, but still need a belt. But this is where it's going to be. It's got plenty of room for the hood. Now I've got to figure out the power steering. There's a reservoir that's got to be in here somewhere. Hoses, so on and so forth. But we're making progress. All right, so I have gone ahead and put the reservoir on here for the aftermarket power steering kit. And as you can see, it's not exactly the sturdiest mount. So what they did was, let's see if I can get some better light in there. What they did was that they used this one little bracket and they wanted you to use a valve cover bolt, obviously for the original Ford tractor engine. But anyway, I felt that that was not really proper, so I went ahead and I bent up this bracket and we're going to weld it to the side. And again, I'll use my mount here for the alternator, and that's going to stiffen up that reservoir nicely. I've gone ahead and just tack welded this bracket into place. And as you can see, that made a really nice and sturdy bracket. And that's going to be a nice addition to our alternator bracket group. That should leave us plenty of room for the hoses to come down to the power steering. And under the hood, we should have plenty of room to be able to access the power steering reservoir. So I'm going to go get this welded and painted, and I'll show you what it looks like. Check it out. It's all done, all ready to go. And that made quite a significant improvement, I think, in the sturdiness of this. I ended up using a bigger 5/16 bolt. These ones here were not very long. So anyway, got a bigger bolt, got a nice bolt here. Gonna go ahead and swap this stuff out and go from there. We still got a lot to do. So this is how we're now gonna check our power steering fluid. Be able to reach in there. That's not too bad. These are the two pumps side by side. Obviously this is a new pump from the conversion kit. This is a pump from the 7.8. As you can see, this has a lot bigger fittings than this pump. And a few differences. These are the same exact teeth, obviously, but the differences are, one difference is the stick out of the gear. This is like 1 3/8. This is like 1 3/16. I'm going to try it just to fit it in there and see if it works. That gear on the timing chain is like 1.5 inches. This is only like 3/4 of an inch, both of these gears. Well, I'll call it 11/16. But anyway, what I'm getting at is it might not necessarily need to be as far as this original pump. If it is, though, if this one does not work, I'm going to have to get new fittings for these size, these size hoses, so I can put them on this pump and reuse this pump. So in this gear case, we can see the wear pattern on the old gear. And as you can see, the wear pattern extends from pretty much right where my pointer is to the outer edge of this gear. So this whole inner piece from here in has never been used, at least as far as the pump that was being used goes. So the pump that we have has the gear mounted closer, and that's not going to hurt a thing because look, we've got like a solid 1/4 of an inch that we can move. So now that gear is going to be more or less floating in the middle or the closer side of this gear than it was before, so that's no big deal. Ford really made these engines universal for fit, so like they could have had a lot of different things mount on that flange. All right, so we've gone ahead and got the pump mounted on the engine, and these fittings are SAE. They have a 45-degree flare, and they're 3/8, which is a very uncommon thing. Typically, hydraulic fittings are JIC, which is a 37-degree. So anyway, I'm going to have to find a 90-degree adapter so that I can make this all work. So anyway, waiting on those parts, but we're getting there, more progress. Moving right along here, I've got a hydraulic hoses ran to the pump, to the reservoir. I had to have these hydraulic hoses made at a local shop. These fittings, like on the pump here, these are actually SAE 45-degree flare. These are 3/8. And the hose that came with the kit went straight off the pump, and that wouldn't work because I've got this oil cooler here that's in the way. So I had to have a 90 there, and I couldn't find a 90 anywhere, so adapter anyway, so I had to have these hoses made. So that looks nice and clean. I got this chafing gear on here. This is the hose that came with it, the return one. I had to get a new hose. This is a power steering return line because the reservoir is mounted up higher than it was intended. But anyway, it's looking pretty darn good. And I've got a pile of belts here. We're going to figure out what belt fits this, and then we're going to be in good shape. So guys, I finally got a belt that fits. If anyone's curious, it's a 175/65. I believe that's 56.5 inches is how they measure that. Anyway, it goes around the water pump, goes around the crank pulley, just perfect. So now we finally have a properly run alternator. Everything is starting to look really good on this side. We're going to start messing with the fans on the radiator, and I think that's what we're going to do next. Here's a quick shot with the hood down on this side, and as you can see, when this hood is closed, there is clearance aplenty. That's kind of a cool shot. So anyway, that looks like it should be there. It doesn't look like it's an afterthought. This adjuster works out really good. I'm very happy with that. Under the hood on this side, we can see it's lined up really well. Everything looks good. There's clearance. I'm happy. I'm going to make a shield here of some kind just so that no one accidentally sticks their fingers in there. That could be a pinch point. Make a nice looking shield there of some kind, and maybe a shield also to kind of protect the alternator from rain. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen there yet. While we're in this area, I wanted to show you guys there's almost no room for a fan on that water pump. And in fact, the water pump doesn't even have threads on it because that never had the fan on it. So remember, we had to lift the radiator up and ahead quite a bit to get it to fit inside this grill shelf. So the simple thing to do would be to put a big fan right here and force air through the radiator. But that's not a good option because those type of fans are not efficient. You're better off to have a fan on this side drawing air through the radiator. That's a much better system. So anyway, we've got about 18 inches square for the core. And what I'm going to do is I think I'm going to put 4 electric fans on this. And I'll show you guys what I have in mind. I know it's a little silly, but I think it's going to work. And I think that's the only way we can get around this really tight fit here. There's only 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches between this pulley and that radiator. So this little construction project here represents 4 fans. These circles are 8.5 inches. This is just some paper I cut out. And that represents an 8-inch fan. Usually the 8-inch fan, the whole body of the fan is like 8 1/4, 8.5, somewhere in that range. So as you can see, these fans fit really nice, and that would flow a ton of air. I've got my radiator here. the good 5-core one, the new one. And I've got a piece of 1/8 inch metal I cut out. This is going to serve as my fan shroud. So I've got a pile of assorted fans here. This is a 6-inch Mishimoto. This one's going to go like right in here, because that's the smallest. The rest of these are 8-inch fans. And these are going to be spread, you know, where I have to put them to avoid interference. So this is basically my plan, guys. I'm going to put these all on here. I know it looks ridiculous having 4 fans, but this is the only thing I can think of that's going to move enough air to cool this radiator. This engine is a lot bigger than what used to be in there, so we need a lot more cooling. So the water pump is like right in here, so it's very close. That's why I had to put these strategically. I'll show you what this looks like once I get further on, but right now we're still kind of in the design phase. So I traced out where I wanted the fans, and I used a plasma cutter to cut these holes out. So now what we're left with is, I still have to clean them up with a grinder, of course, and make them really nice and clean. But we're left with now a perfectly good opening for the fan. I've got a bunch more done here on the fan shroud. So basically what happens is this turns to the side, and then this whole thing can lift right out. I've got these tabs kind of welded on here, and I've got some nice stiffening on the sides, the bottom, like top I guess you'd call it. So this thing fits in there really nice. Still have to do some more fabricating to get this fastened to the side. I'm using this existing radiator shell or support frame, whatever you want to call this. I think what I'm going to do is drill 1/4-inch holes and weld nuts on the back side. That way I can take this in and out. I want to be able to use as much of the original radiator as possible. That way anything happens down the line and I need a new radiator, I can just take this and bolt it right on a new radiator. So check it out, guys. This is the first look of the fan collection on this radiator. And as you can see, we are very close to some components. We're using every available inch that we have. Maybe you can see it a little better on this side. So the belt is going to come right through here. It's going to miss. So as you can see, it's a very, very tight squeeze. As you can see, this radiator is still quite wobbly. I'm going to have to tie in this radiator to the shroud that goes over this, because I don't want this flopping around. It's probably going to be fine if I left it alone, but I'd like to get that a little better supported. So check it out, guys. I've even gone to the extreme for these braces to kind of flatten them out with the torch. Well, heat them up with the torch, flatten them out with a hammer to make it kind of look like the original braces. I use this big chunk of metal here because I don't have an anvil. That worked out pretty slick. As you can see, I've got this side done already. You can see that detail. It's not done per se. I still have to take it off and paint it. But I wanted to mimic the original bend. That was probably stamped. I think it looks kind of neat. So anyway, I've got that one more brace on that side. I've welded a little brace here to the side of the radiator, and that's going to really stiffen up that radiator. So the idea is I can take off this grill shell, and I could still have the support for the radiator without the grill shell. So I've got this on there. That's gusseted now, and then this radiator will be gusseted, and then I think we'll have enough gusseting or bracing. I took some time to get this painted, and I am very happy with the way this turned out. I've got a lot of time involved in this shroud, and I think the time has really paid off. So I'm going to go ahead and get these fans on there. I'm going to get working on a plug harness for the fans, and then this can pretty much go back into the tractor. So we're making good headway. I've gone ahead and put all of the wiring in a bundle, and I'm using one of these 8-pin Deutsch connectors. This is the 12-gauge model. They sell these pre-wired pigtails, which are pretty darn handy. So anyway, I've got all the powers on one side and all the grounds on the other. And if I want to take this radiator off, now I can just kind of make one connection, and the whole radiator will come right off with fans and everything still intact. I still need to put the fans on permanently. Right now they're just kind of sitting, so I could get all the cable management where I want it to be. So I'll show you more after I get more done. So there it is. Looks pretty darn nice if I do say so myself. and I can finish routing this whenever I get it all installed in the tractor. But for right now, this radiator is pretty much complete. All I gotta do is fashion some kind of catch can, but that's no big deal. All right, so check this out. That's a tremendous amount of air coming through there. All right, so I finally reached a point where I'm happy with the fan group, the fan shroud that I just made, and also the alternator bracket. I'm very happy with everything that I've got going on so far. As you can see, it's all a really tight little package now. I can get to everything. This is the adjuster for the alternator, so I can keep this tension adjusted. I can also get to the drain right there to drain the radiator if I ever need to, all within easy reach. The fan group, you know, everything is very close. As you can see, there's not a lot of extra room in there. But I've got this connector here, so I'm going to start my wiring harness. I'm going to start my upper radiator connection. I've got a lot of work done. And I know this doesn't seem like a lot, guys, but I've got over 40 hours of work in making all this bracketry here that you see. It just takes a ridiculous amount of time. And the way I've designed this radiator now is that the radiator is its own unit. I can now take the grill shell on and off without having to interrupt the radiator. So I'm very happy with that. I'm very happy with that. It has taken a lot of time and engineering to make this all happen. And as you can see there, the water pump is very, very, very close. But I have to work with the work that I've got in order to make this happen. We're getting close. I'm very happy because soon I'm going to be able to fire this up with coolant, everything else, so that I can run it for a while and actually hear it and get to use this tractor without having to worry about overheating it. So making steps. As you can see, we do not have room for a large battery anymore. So my thought was, why not mount the battery right here? Perfect spot, close to the starter. All right, so I was just starting this tractor and letting it run for a bit, and I got thinking about where I'm going to put this battery, and I was kind of looking at that going, man, that's a pretty sweet spot. This is the original battery tray. So I may try to modify this tray. I'd like to build a cover for it so that this battery is not just sitting out here getting rained on and snowed on. But I'm not quite sure. I think that's a pretty good spot. It's kind of out of the way. Looks like it ought to be there. So I'm thinking, instead of using this big 4 DLT battery, which weighs a lot and takes up a tremendous amount of space, I'm thinking I might use one of these. This is a group 31 battery. This has the posts, the threaded posts, but they make these with the regular posts too. This is about 1,000 cold cranking amps. This is a pretty big battery. And I think I might use that because this is a gear reduction starter that I've got in here. And it doesn't really need the amount of cranking time, I think, that big 4D battery would provide. And plus, this fits so nice in here. I could make a really nice tray, make a top for it, and I don't think that would take up hardly any room compared to that big 40, which is going to be way out here. I just didn't like the look of that. That battery, in my opinion, you know, kind of keeps nice and flush to the side of the tractor, and I think that's going to be more than enough cranking amp to turn this thing over even in the winter months. When it comes to the battery box for this tractor, I don't really have anything, so I kind of created this out of cardboard. This is kind of what I'm thinking about, and I've experimented with it, and I think this is going to be the best bet. So essentially, I've made this lid. It's all going to be 1/8" plate metal, I think. Basically, that's going to fit on there, and I'm going to have some of those big rubber latches that hold down the battery top. And I think that's going to be a cool solution. It's going to look neat. I think it's going to look somewhat original. Like a battery box should look as if it was on this Ford. And it's going to house these big 31 group batteries, which this is a 31 HD P30. Basically, this is the biggest one you can get. It's 1,000 cold cranking amps. This is going to be a heck of a battery. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'll show you kind of real quick how I'm going to make this box and how we're going to attach it to the tractor. This is the beginning of my battery box. I've used an old piece of recycled 5/16 steel that came from an old sailboat. And I've got some 1/8 inch metal that I cut out. And I'm going to kind of start putting these pieces together. So here we go, guys. This is kind of the bottom half of the toolbox. This is the bottom half of the battery box, and as you can see, we got plenty of room for a tie down. This is all just kind of tacked together. It's not permanent, but this is what it's going to be like. So there'll be plenty of room for battery cables and everything else on top. I'm kind of happy with the way that's going to look. So I use this really big thick piece of metal on the bottom so that I can weld directly to that where it's going to mount. And this is going to have a lot of strength. All right, so here we go, guys. I built a top for the box now. And as you can see, I've welded in these little tabbies here. And those are going to lock right on the top to keep everything secure. So this is kind of what I'm left with, a really nice lid. Let's see if I can do this with one hand. So basically, it's going to go there. That's going to go just like that. And see, I've left a little overhang here so rain won't pour into the box. I'm very happy with that. I've got some cool latches on the way that are going to hold the box lid down. And that's going to be the new battery box. I think I can radius these corners maybe, make it look a little more stock. But overall, I'm very happy with the way this is looking. It's going to take a long time now to finish all the welding and everything. This is the battery box made out of steel. So that took a lot of time, and I'm very happy with it. And if I can do this with just one hand. It holds one Group 31 battery. Now we will be styling. So check it out, guys. I've got these cool straps on there like you'd see on the hood of a truck. These are the old numbers from these buyers' latches, WJ206. Kind of a cool little piece that you can use for pretty much any box or anything of that sort. So I think that's kind of a cool touch. I took my old battery box and I cut these pieces out, and now I can use my original hold downs for the battery on the battery box. So I thought that was kind of a cool touch. So I'll get the battery hold down finished up, and then I can start mounting this whole box to the tractor. Oh, I've got my battery hold down all figured out now. Kind of looks clean, looks like it ought to be there. So happy with that. Now the only thing I've got to figure out is how to get the cables through the box. Might have to end up making some holes somehow, maybe one on either side. Haven't quite figured that out, but making steps. So I whipped up this bracket. I know it's not much, but this is going to bolt to the side of the tractor, and that's what's going to hold my battery box in place. So I can weld right to these arms here. These are 1/4 inch thick. That's some old recycled material I had laying around. And this is some 3/8 angle iron left over from some other project. So that's going to be a perfect brace. Now we can go ahead and get this battery box mounted on the tractor. So it's on the tractor now. As you can see, plenty of clearance for everything. Clearance in between here. It's just tacked in place right now, but that's pretty much the final location where it's going to be. If I ever want to run a frame brace, I still have room I can tie into this piece, you know, for the rear axle to come up here. If I want to hang a weight bracket from underneath the tractor, I can still use these 2 bolts to have a weight bracket come down and out, you know, so I could hang suitcase weights here. But I'm very happy with that, and this is how it works. So that's how you'll load the battery into the tractor. And I still have to figure out where the holes are going to be for the cables before I paint this thing. But it's getting there. To dress off the back of the battery box, I've just got these cool little louvers that I put over the holes for the cable management. Now these are 1.5 inch holes, so I can use like an 1.5 inch grommet to put on there. I just don't want rain getting into this box. So as you can see, I've kind of made them slanted this way so water should shed right around. So I think it's kind of a cool look, maybe a little unnecessary, but I don't want water in this box after all this work. Alright, moving right along here. We've got the battery box installed, got the battery in there. Now I've got to figure out my cable situation. I think for the positive I'm going to go through here, down around, and then back up over. And then the ground, I think I might go from here, kind of run those wires up to the starter. So I haven't quite figured that out, but we will get there. So one thing at a time, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I also got a new governor control arm, so that way I can run my throttle. The old one, the spring had actually sheared off, and this was just flopping around. So when it comes to the coolant pipes on this tractor, we're kind of paving new territory. I've tried all the off-the-shelf coolant hoses and nothing really fits. So I've got some 2-inch mandrel bend 90s. These are just extremely sharp 90s, 2-inch OD. And I'm going to make my own pipes. So I got this stuff from Jegs, of course, and I got a bunch of these cool T-bolt clamps. These are stainless. And I've also got some cool pieces here, some 2-inch ID pipes with clamps. I got this stuff on Amazon. This is for the upper radiator hose. This is a nice, I don't think you'd call this a mandrel bend, but this is all silicone, 4-ply, really nice hose. I've got some reducers. Let's go make some coolant pipes. All right, so the upper radiator hose was kind of a breeze to make. Literally just one of those 90s, a flexible 90, silicone 90, and a reducer from 2-inch to 1.5 inch inner diameter. So I've got these clamps on here. I like these T clamps. These really work well. I may end up spinning some of these clamps. I don't know if I like the orientation that they're at right now, but this is the upper radiator hose. That was easy. And these are 180-degree thermostats. There's 2 of them in here. So anyway, when it comes to this section of hose, this is going to be a little more involved. I have to come out with a 90, down with a 90, and then ahead with a 90. So I'll show you guys what I've got in mind for that. All right, so here we go. This is the construction of the bottom water coolant pipe. It's a little funky, but we still have more to go. So I'll show you what that looks like. I've just got it tack welded here right now. I've got all these pieces now tacked together. And believe me, I've got a lot of time invested in this lower radiator pipe, more so than I care to admit. But to get these cuts just perfect, it takes a lot of time. So anyway, that is what we're going to be looking at for a radiator hose, and I'm really happy with that. Now the water pump can't collapse this hose. It's really solid. It does stick out a little bit past the hood, but I think it's going to be just fine. Looks nice. So let's get it finished welded, and I'm going to check for leaks and then paint it, put it right back on. So I've got this thing full of water. I just got a cap on this end. I'm just checking for leaks. I had one pinhole I had to fix. Otherwise, it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and get some paint on this and put it on the tractor. So check it out. I'm pretty darn happy with the way this turned out. This is going to flow a lot of coolant without collapsing that lower radiator hose, and I think it'll just look kind of neat. Took a lot of time, so maybe someone down the road will appreciate all these little details whenever they look at this tractor. So with these coolant pipes for the intercooler, these are all swelled up and expanded and pretty much garbage. So I've gone ahead and ordered some of these from my local CarQuest. These are Daco, part number 80411. It's a really nice, this is a really nice preformed 90-degree 3/4 inch. So that's going to go with these nice pieces that I just painted. So I ended up just putting a weld in this nipple here just in case I ever need to use it again. I don't think I will, but if I just cut that off, I can have a perfectly good nipple in case I need a vent, a steam vent or something like that. So anyway, I've got 2 of these, and that should be enough to get these coolant pipes back on the machine. So I've got those hoses all plumbed now. These go to there's a heat exchanger brick inside this intake manifold that cools the intake temperature from the turbo. And those coolant lines look pretty nice, if I do say so myself. Nothing rubs, everything looks good. So now, before I can put coolant in this thing, I've got to figure out this coolant filter situation. I might have to move this coolant filter. This is just a spin-on cartridge. The reason for that is because this fuel filter housing right here, as you can see, when I close my hood, it strikes the filter housing. So those filters need to be relocated somewhere. I think the most logical place is right down here where this bolt and this bolt will go. Now, in doing that, I'm going to have to redo these fuel lines, which it's kind of a bummer to have to move this because all these lines are bent really nice and they look like they should be there. But this is in the way and it needs to go somewhere. I could just lower this down. I would still have to shorten the lines. I think I'm going to undo this filter housing, try to put it down there, and then if I have to put another bend in this coolant line, I can do that before I put coolant in the engine. And just like that, we took off the fuel filter housing and the hood fits. There's plenty of clearance, all cool and everything else. And look where I tucked it. Right down in here, using factory bolts holes that were already in the block, pre-tapped and everything. And I like that. It's down there nice and compact. Now I've got all my filters like in a nice little row. I can then reroute my coolant hose once I get these lines figured out. And I just wanted to show you guys, these fuel lines are really weird. These are like 5/16 steel flare fuel lines with an olive or a rubber seal and like a compression union type thing. They're kind of rare in, you know, today's day and age, anything outside of a fuel system. So they're everywhere though on this pump, on the fuel pump itself and on the injection pump where these, I believe these are some kind of check valves or pressure valves, so those have to stay. But this little fitting here can be removed, so I got to find what these are. Okay, so this is the fitting here that was in the fuel filter housing. Now I just threaded this on here with a 1/2 inch by 20 nut just to verify that it in fact was a 1/2 by 20. And you can see there's a little O-ring in there. That O-ring is what seals the fitting and everything else. And on this side, this is where the 5/16 fuel line went in with that ferrule. So I can't find these anywhere, and I can't find the fuel line. I don't want to deal with it. I found this company HPS on eBay. They make these little, like, cool little adapters and stuff like that. So this is the same 1/2 by 20, and it's got a nice little O-ring. But on this end, there is a -6 AN taper right there, so that we can use our regular AN-6 fuel lines. So I've got 4 of those, so we can convert those steel lines to the flexible braided fuel hose. So I just wanted to show you guys how these little adapters go in. They make a lot of cool fittings for AN stuff. So just like that. So I've got 4 of those. Got to put one in here, one in here, and one in here. All right, so I splashed a little Ford blue on there. I'm going to change that filter at some point. And fuel filter housing is now blue. Kind of slowly getting rid of this industrial gray. Eventually the whole thing will be blue. So let's keep going. I ordered a bunch of, this is like a 25-foot roll of -6 AN line. And it came with a bunch of these cool fittings like the straight, the 90s, and the 45s, and also these 180s, which, as you can see here, I made a nice little hose that's going to be for the feed side of the fuel filter. And I'll show you how that works. And these AN lines are so nice. Like, it's such a nice finished product after it's done. And they just look really nice and they hold really well. And it's a great way to update a lot of these old vintage fittings that you can't get anymore. So that's the first line that comes basically directly from the tank down to the fuel filter, and now we've got to come from the fuel filter up to the injection pump inlet right here. So I've got one more to make, and then this will pretty much be the fuel system. You know, I really should just do all of these in AN lines, but this is getting expensive. Like, these fittings are like 16 bucks a piece, these 1/2 by 20 to 6 adapters. And then I would need to buy 1, 2, 3, 4 more of them. And then more hose. And I got to draw the line somewhere, guys. I do have to stop at some point. Like, this whole tractor build is getting expensive. I got to close the purse at some point. So, anywho, one more fuel line, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right. So, there's the feed line to the injector pump. That one kind of loops down through there and looks kind of neat, I think. So, now all I've got to do is route this hose to right here somehow without rubbing against these new hoses I just put on there, and it's always something. I've got this coolant line all plumbed, and I've used some of that chafing gear for like hydraulic hoses and stuff like that, so that way it goes down beside the injector pump nice and neat and it won't get cut up. So another thing I wanted to show you is this filter. I don't know if you guys remembered, I dropped the engine on this filter in the oil pan. It kind of messed that up a little bit in the first video. This oil filter housing took a great deal of the force. I don't know if it ruined the housing or just the filter. So it really did a number on this filter. This is a coolant filter. I'm hoping that stud is not bent, but I guess we will find out here in short order. So I got really lucky. That threaded right on and didn't have any issues, so the threads were totally fine. 89206. That replaced the Napa number that was there originally. So cool, guys. So now we are getting ready to be able to get the coolant system filled. All right, this is just one detail I wanted to show. This is a 3/8 to 1/8 inch reducer, and this is the temperature sender for one of my gauges. I had to drill this out to 7/16 because whenever this was threaded in, this was too tight and coolant couldn't get around the sensor. So that way, you know, coolant will be able to flood this area where the pickup is. Now you can see that detail a little bit better. See that reducer now has a lot of clearance so that coolant can fully surround that sensor probe. This is going to go in where the thermostat housing is. I'll show you that. All right, guys, so I got both temperature senders in there. This is for the fans, this is for the gauge, and I think we are ready to put some coolant in this bad paparuski. So, pretty excited. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple gallons in to see if there's any leaks, and then I'll top off the radiator up to somewhere in this range, and let it set for a couple days and see if we've got any leaks. All right, so we just lost 4 gallons of coolant in here, and it's not even close to being full. So I'm gonna leave it right there for a while just to check if there's any leaks. I hope there are none, because coolant's kind of expensive. I should have put water in here first, but we're being very confident, I guess. Confident in the fact that there won't be any leaks. So anyway, I'll show you guys if there's any leaks. If not, I'm hoping I can just get this thing topped off and forget about it. All right, so this is kind of the idea I had. I welded this piece a 3/16 on the bottom of where this old relay block used to be. This is where the relay used to be for the starter, but now I've got this battery disconnect switch. So I think that's kind of cool. This is the pin for the old battery tray. I might take that out and fill that with weld. But I'm kind of happy with that. That's kind of an easy location. I can just shut the battery down real quick if I need to. So that's what I've been working on there. Alright, so I went and added a nice little louver. I think that looks kind of cool. Just a piece of exhaust pipe that I cut up. The effort was to make a little shield so that water wouldn't soak the switch here. So I think that looks kind of neat. So now I might have to do something back here to cover up the back of this because that's all exposed now. So we'll figure out that, but I think that's pretty much done. That's a cool location. Now I can get the battery cables ran to where they gotta go. Alright, so I got a little carried away. I ended up making this cool little bracket to kind of match the level of the visor. And there's a little Ford logo. I used a piece of the old alternator bracket left over from the truck. And I've got a piece on this side. It's kind of to help shield the water from this, but also just to look cool. So I've also got to cut this bracket and lower this down, I think like 1.5 inches to match the top. Remember how we had to lower the fuel tank bracket? So I'm gonna have to do that on this side. I might as well do it now because, hey, we're right in here. I got the welder out. It's a nice day. Let's grind that, bring that down, and then that will be pretty much all ready to go for the dashboard, which we're gonna be putting on soon. All right, so after some careful measurements, we've got 1 7/16 inches. We've got 1 7/16 inches down. I've used the square so that I can make sure at the same mark. As you can see, we've dropped it down just like that center one for the fuel tank. See that? So I'm going to go ahead and get this welded. I may get a piece to fill in there just so that's got the same structure as it did before. And I'm thinking that's going to be just right. So check it out. This is the battery cable that was on the Ford 5000 that I had made. This was a 2 gauge. And this is the cable that I pulled off my Dodge. It's got the Cummins diesel in it. And it had failed on this end. But this is 2-watt cable, and this is really nice cable. So I'm reusing this. This is going to be the cable for the tractor now. So I don't think I'm going to have any battery cable issues for a while. This is that 2-watt cable that I used, and nice and heavy going to the starter lug. And this is a gear reduction starter too, so this should consume a lot less current than the old starter. I've just got to put this ground cable somewhere, maybe there, but there's a lug here, so we'll see. And I've got this nice battery disconnect switch now, so that's cool. It's shielded from the rain. We are making progress. All right, so here we go. Pretty sure I'm all done with battery cables for a while. I may just get more of this chafing sleeve for this ground cable because it is kind of rubbing up against there, and I'll zip tie that up out of the way. But that's pretty much done, all soldered. The battery cable connections are really nice, so I shouldn't have to deal with this for a while. And I've got battery disconnect switch working. Now, if I want to start it, I can literally just take this hot wire from the solenoid and go right to the battery. For now, that's going to be how I start this thing. So, pretty excited. I am moving right along. All right, we're just going to try to get this fired up. It may have some air in the fuel system. Let's see. Definitely got some air in the fuel system. Just now beginning to smell some fuel. I think it was airbound. So I just figured I'd stop and I'd check the power steering because the fluid was getting kind of low. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's very low, so I'm glad I stopped. I just ran it for a minute. Everything looked pretty good. The only thing is that harmonic balancer pulley is wobbling quite a bit. Not quite sure what happened there, but it is what it is. No leaks as of yet. Everything looks good. Very excited. Listen how easy this thing fires up now. got some issues going on with the power steering. The power steering is not power steering. Anyway, I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. It's definitely circulating fluid. All the hoses are warm to the touch, and I don't know if it's just because the tires are in a rut and I need to just move it around, or if it's because it's idling and I can't idle it up. I think there's air in the power steering system. So got to work on that, got to get that figured out.
Finally moved under its own power.
Been there for a while. Look at that. It's cool to have it move finally.
My temporary throttle.
Alright guys, so I'm going to end the video right here. There's still a lot more to do on this tractor, but I am stoked. I finally got it running. I'm pretty sure I got the issues figured out with the power steering. It was just idling way too low, so I increased the idle a little bit. But still, this is more of like a power steering assist. If you sit there and just crank the wheel, it doesn't have enough RPM to actually turn the wheel. So you have to like increase the RPM to actually get the thing to turn the wheel. Not super happy with this, but it's kind of the only thing I could have that made this whole thing work. So anyway, I am very stoked with where we're at. Still have a lot of work to do to get the tin back on, extend the hood. However, I'm going to end this video now because I'm sure this is going to be another long one, and I just have so much more work to do. So for those of you who don't know, this is May. We're near the middle of May 2025. So maybe by the end of summer I'll have this thing to the point where it looks like a tractor, like a proper tractor with a hood, the dashboard, the gauges, proper throttle cables. I just have so much more work to do. I forgot I left that chain on there from whenever I was lifting the engine. I got to get the fans wired up. I've got a whole fuse block and everything. I'm thinking I might put here somewhere. I just have tons of work to do, but I've come so far, so I'm very happy to see this thing finally moving under its own power. Everything works good with the clutch, everything works good with the brakes still, the hydraulics still function as they should. So we're in good shape as far as that stuff goes. So I'm going to close out here, guys, and stay tuned for part 4.